It is a rare sighting these days, and we're here to continue that conversation now. The second-year congressmen join us, and I should note, you two are friends, despite being on opposite sides of the aisle. Thank you so much for being here for these important discussions. I think people are just craving civility in politics and to hear civil discussions about the most important topics of the day. One of those topics, of course, guns, as we were just talking about. In this culture of fear, do you both agree there is a gun violence crisis in America? Who wants to
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely. I mean, the evidence speaks for itself. Guns are the #1 killer of children in our country because of the culture of fear mongering that has been facilitated and nurtured mostly by the Republican Party. You have people getting shot, innocent people getting shot in driveways, ringing the wrong doorbell. You have 14-year-olds in my district, and I'm sure not far or within Byron's district, being killed with illegal guns that are trafficked from Republican-led states for the most part. So there's a gun epidemic absolutely in our country. There has been for many years, and we need to move heaven and earth to stop this. Ban assault rifles. Let's have universal background checks, universal red flag laws, and let's make sure that law enforcement is actually tracking gun crime in their states. I learned recently, out of 17,000 law enforcement agencies, only 7,000 track firearm crimes in their jurisdictions. The other 10,000 do not. We need to know where the guns are coming from, how they're getting in, and stop them from getting in to the places where they're killing black and poor people.
Well, first of all, a couple of things. The tragedies we see on TV are horrific. You know, just looking at the footage of the father talking about what happened to his daughter going into the wrong driveway and his grief, that's something that shakes everybody. Two things. One, we do have a criminal justice system that is supposed to hold people accountable when these tragedies occur. That's number one. So the process does have to work. But number two, this is the balance. This is where this comes into play. Americans do have constitutional rights to hold firearms. That is in the Constitution. It is our governing document. And unless members of Congress go through the process of amending our Constitution, that is the law of the land. So I understand the grief that so many families deal with, but you have more than 100 million gun owners in our country. They own guns legally, they own them lawfully, they respect everybody's humanity, and they use them for sport or whatever, and they don't harm other people. When these tragedies occur, it is horrific. But we also have to understand that in our country, we have a balance to protect all rights. People's right to live, 100%, but people's right also to bear arms. They are equal rights that have to be protected, and Congress is mandated to do that. Last piece I will say. Last Congress, I know there was a bill that came through the House. House Democrats, my colleague Jamaal Bowman voted for that legislation. I voted against it. It didn't go anywhere in the Senate. In Barack Obama's first term, they had control of all three branches. If you remember, they had 60 votes in the Senate. They could have did everything that Jamaal wanted to do. They didn't do that when Barack Obama was president. Why? Because the data does not support the arguments that we're seeing. The tragedy speaks to everybody. I'm not discounting the tragedy. But when you look at the data, long run, for some of the provisions that he's supporting, the assault weapons ban to be one, the New York Times came out and reported in 2014 it had no effect. The Department of Justice reported it had no effects. The Rand Corporation did a study. They said it had no effect on decreasing the atrocities that we unfortunately do see in America.
So first of all, the Second Amendment also reads well regulated. Right now, the guns in this country are not well regulated. So we have assault rifles getting into the hands of 18-year-olds and getting into the hands of people that should not have guns. And they're killing children as young as 6 years old in our nation. That is unacceptable. We need to deal with the well-regulated part of the Second Amendment as well as the rest of it. That's number one. Number two, law enforcement at best exists on the back end, responding to a crime after it's committed. We need to do a much better job of being proactive and preventative from leaving people to commit crimes in the first place, which means we have to invest in historically disenfranchised communities. We can't talk about guns and gun violence without talking about poverty. We need to spend as much as necessary to invest in historically disenfranchised communities to end poverty in our country, which deals with the trauma, which deals with the mental health, which deals with the substance abuse. I need to see Republican leadership on this and Democratic leadership on this. Third, after the Sandy Hook shooting, we still could not ban assault weapons in our nation. And to Byron's point, yes, Democrats have to be more aggressive in ensuring that we do what we need to do, not just legislatively, but with our voice to respond to the NRA and respond to those who continue to be Second Amendment purists. And then lastly, Republicans are sacrificing our children for the Second Amendment. Our children, our most precious resource, children that will grow up to be creators, innovators, designers, solve climate change, save our democracy from itself. We have Republican members of the House wearing assault rifle pins on the House floor after mass shootings have occurred. So this tells you what their priorities are. Assault weapons, the Second Amendment part of it, not the well-regulated part, over the lives of innocent Americans. That's unacceptable.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I completely disagree with the argument that Republicans are sacrificing the lives of kids. That is not true. Republicans support law and order in every community in America.
It's not about law
Jamal,
and
you
order.
already know
Do
this.
something
It is about law and order. Do you know why? Because if you don't take crime seriously at the lower level, if you don't take it seriously, it precipitates two things.
Why
Number
do people
one,
commit crime?
Can I finish?
I'll let you talk. Well, you're going to crime.
Because it's
We're
a part of
talking
what,
about
it's, because
guns.
it's a part of what we're talking about. A gun by itself is an object, it is a tool. But what we're talking about is its use in tragedies where people lose lives. Two key things. Number one, if law enforcement in a jurisdiction does not have the ability to do its job and hold people accountable when they break the law.
Who is saying?
Can I
why
finish?
are you saying
Let me
law
make my
enforcement
point.
doesn't have the
finish.
Why won't you?
Let him
But let me
finish.
make
They're
my
doing
point.
their job.
We have several jurisdictions where law enforcement is actually prohibited from doing their job. We could talk about various district attorneys in various districts throughout the United States. We could talk about various judges who actually turn down holding people accountable for committing crime. You have police officers in our country who are doing their job. They're locking up criminals. But then what happens is the DA or the judge turns them loose on the backside. What you create in that environment is, number one, a citizenry who is thinking, man, if the police can't protect me, then I got to do this on my own. That's why law enforcement is critical to all of this.
Byron,
we got to continue to do that.
But that's
one. Now let's talk about the front
That's
end.
after the fact.
But now let's talk about the front end.
Talk about the front end,
If
please.
you believe that we should be investing in poverty, the United States government has been doing that to the tune of more than $10 trillion with the Great Society passed by Lyndon Johnson. But here's what Republicans support. We have long supported school choice and opportunities for parents to find the best place for their child to attend. Not every academic institution that you might be redlined for lack of a better phrase, fits the need of that child. Help those parents get where they need to go. Number two,
Byron, school choice doesn't end poverty.
You the tools.
You
Actually,
all
I'm
over
giving
the
you the
place.
tools. No, I'm not.
You
It
got-
does.
Okay, let's
because
end on
school choice leads to
I wanna get-
economic opportunity.
That doesn't
and
end
economic
poverty.
opportunity leads to
We
getting out of poverty.
have an
All right,
economic system.
let's hear what Congressman Bowman has
We
to say
have
now.
an economic system where two of the wealthiest Americans own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the country. We have levels of economic inequality that are worse than the Gilded Age. To truly invest in poverty, you have to reverse the impact of the disproportionate distribution of wealth that happened post-slavery. The Homestead Act, which gave the entire West to white Americans, both native and foreign born, that kept black people from getting that land, those homes, and building wealth. Black banks have never been invested in the way that, let's say, the Bank of Italy was invested in, that now has become Bank of America, one of our largest banks. You've had Jim Crow, black laws, KKK, mass incarceration. You've had globalization where with the race to the bottom, chasing low-cost labor all over the world, taking industrial jobs out of the black communities. You know what they brought back in? Cops and drugs and the numbers game. You gave us an illegal economy and cops, but never repaired the harm that you have caused, which is why mostly gun trafficking is trafficking in the black and brown communities, and black and brown people are killing each other with it. So when I talk about dealing with the issue of poverty, I'm talking about reparations, repairing the historic harm, investing in schools equitably. Right now, if you live in a wealthy community, you get more money for your school than you live in a poor community. And the poor community is only poor because they were redlined by the United States government via the GI Bill. Come on now.
Now, let me address a couple of your things. So the first thing you said is about income inequality. Listen, of course, incomes are not equal because everybody has different levels of talent, ability. People have started in different parts in life. We both acknowledge that.
Yes.
I will never sit here and say
some
that.
Were slave masters,
But Jamaal,
Okay.
I'm never going to sit here and say that black people in America started at the same place of other people in America. I'm not going to make that point because we both know that is not true. But let's talk about the reality of economics today in America. You mentioned the Gilded Age, that it was actually less income inequality back during the time of the aristocracy and kings and queens than today. That is factually not true because the kings owned all. The serfs, the peasants owned nothing. Even in America today, where you have people who have enormous wealth, you have a lot of people on the low end, the bottom end of our socioeconomic spectrum, who have better lives, better conditions, make more money than the serfs ever did during that time. Do you know what unleashed that? Free market capitalism in the West is what unleashed that. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to get to a situation where black wealth grows, or frankly, people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum's wealth grows, then you have to respect property rights. Because once you let the government say that they have the ability to take from one to give to the other, or to say that, you know what, we're going to go borrow, frankly, more than the $32 trillion we already owe to other people, and we're going to just borrow that and then make future Americans across the board pay that debt, then what you're also saying is there is no respect for individual property. There is no respect for individual assets. There is no respect for the innovation necessary to create all the wealth that's been created in America. I'm not sitting here to say that, oh, it's all fair, it's all good. Life ain't fair. You want fair, go to a carnival, go get you an elephant ear. Life's not fair. I would never say that. But what I say is, and what I advocate for, is that our economic system, by far, is the most fair because it gives people like ourselves an ability to change where we came from, which we both did, to where we are now. There are people, colleagues of mine, friends of mine from high school, they've achieved more than me, they've achieved less than me. This is the way life is in America. And what we got to be honest about and be direct to the American people is that if you actually take education, family creation, choices in life, college debt's one, we could talk about that too. And all those various things, you bring them together in our fabric of an economic engine that actually grows and doesn't stagnate. That's the pathway towards success.
So please explain to me why, let's stay with the racial issue for a second.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Black people have worse education outcomes, worse economic outcomes, worse healthcare outcomes, and a shorter lifespan. Do you think that's genetic?
Well, the first I would say is
do you think that's genetic? Do you think?
No, actually,
do you think we still have this level of racial wealth inequality in America because of genetics?
No, I don't.
You don't. Hold on, I'm not finished.
Go ahead.
I would argue.
I actually think black people, we're talented. We can do it all. But that's me.
There's no question about that. That's why you and I are here. We are examples of that, right? My point is, we are anomalies. We are outliers to our people writ large, and we see disproportionate harm to our people that has to be addressed. Now, in terms of present day, I mentioned the wealth inequality. Sure. We still have a regressive tax code when it comes to the wealthiest Americans. I would argue that the wealthiest Americans are not contributing their fair share to our government.
Well, wait.
Let me finish. I would also argue
go ahead.
that large corporations do not contribute their fair share to our democracy. And as a result of that, the government is not generating the revenue that it would need to reinvest in universal child care, which is absolutely necessary for a thriving society, paid leave, which we're the only developed nation that doesn't have paid leave, universal pre-K, and investments on the front end so that we can have better long-term outcomes. because of historical trauma in certain communities, those communities, and because of consistent, persistent political harm that comes from the policies we are not enacting in Congress, certain groups of people are not moving forward. And the last thing I'll say is this. We have been trying and pushing President Biden to pass transformational legislation to address some of these issues. I want to name a few. The CHIPS and Science Act, bipartisan piece of legislation passed by the president. The Inflation Reduction Act, passed by the president. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, passed by the president. The Safer Communities Act, passed by the president, which was also bipartisan. Between the IRA and the CHIPS and Science Act, we already see money just started going out the door, $200 billion. Created 82,000 jobs, 75% to Republican jurisdictions. So just transitioning to the kind of leadership we need from the executive, the president has done some good things, but obviously we have to push him to do much more. And we need Republicans and Democrats on the same page to take our country to the place it's never been. Old arguments are not going to suffice.
All right. Really quickly, and then we're going to come back and finish the discussion.
Ooh, really quickly. He's got a lot in there.
I know, but then you can do the other. You can do it after the break. But go ahead.
Let me tackle one thing, and we'll come back to the other stuff. If you're talking about the ability for kids on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum to learn, they have every capability to do that. But what do most kids who are poor in America realize? They're in an educational system where A, they don't have the resources to them. B, some of the standards have been lowered because
That's not true.
Oh, yes, it is true.
I worked in education for 20 years.
No.
That's not true.
I've seen the data. My mother worked in education
That's not
too.
true.
I've seen the data. I've seen the facts.
It's not true.
Standards have been lowered in mathematics and in reading.
Not true.
To just say, oh, well, there's not.
We have a common core standards that's
We
across
have
the nation.
cities that have done this.
We have common core.
cities that have done this. I'll let you talk about. Let me talk.
Yes, go ahead.
So if you're not going to have an adequate standard for kids to rise and meet, how do you expect them to go ahead and thrive? That's one thing. That's just one thing. Mm-hmm. So that's why I advocate for we should actually have many opportunities for kids to go find the academic outfit that they need for their success, because their brilliance is unmatched, but it's got to be unleashed. And unfortunately, between a lot of things going on at home and things going on in the public school system, it's not being unleashed.
Okay, pause right there.
I'll
I'll let you finish at the other side of this break, because you're right, you do deserve more time. I'm trying to be fair here and equitable. And thank you both for bringing the fire and the civility. We're going to continue this conversation up next inside the 2024 race as we get new insight into Biden's re-election plans. So tell us, why did you choose Trump over DeSantis?
Well, hold on. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. We got to address some things, America. Okay. Our tax code is one of the most progressive in the world. It is not regressive. The top 1% pays 20% of the entire federal income tax bill. The top 40%, pays over 60%. The top 90% pay everything. The top 50% pay everything. The top 10%, got it wrong. The top 10 pay 90% of everything, okay? It is by far one of the most progressive in the world. I think what you're referring to is dealing with FICA and payroll taxes, which everybody pays because everybody does pay into Social Security and Medicare. We got to understand that. Step number two, we raised more revenue in the United States under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Some people refer to as the Trump tax cuts. We raised more revenue than at any point in American history, $4.5 trillion. We've never raised that kind of money in the United States. So we raise tax revenue all over the place. Corporations are paying. Rich people are paying. Upper middle class people are paying. Middle class people are paying. And trust me, they're paying because if you ask them what's going on their tax bill, they'll tell you. So they're paying the taxes. The problem is here in Washington, D.C., we spend way more than we have. We just raised $4.5 trillion. We spent $6 trillion last year. $6 trillion. The president wants to go spend $7 trillion. That just doesn't make any sense at all. That is not sustainable. We do have to get our house in order if then you want to talk about all these things, Jamaal, that you're talking about. Because the thing that's coming for every American under this economy, number one has been inflation. We all know it. It's been covered ad nauseum. Number two is the fact that if we continue to borrow money recklessly, interest on the debt will become larger than what we pay on defense, larger than what we pay in discretionary programs. We got to take seriously the spending of the American people's money, and we got to do it in a consistent and bipartisan way, I will add, to make sure that we lower our debt and we get on a balanced budget track. Now, hold on. Now to the other question.
Okay, here we go.
So here's the deal. Yes, I have endorsed President Trump. Looking at the world right now, we are on the precipice, frankly, of World War III in a lot of cases. Russia is heavily involved in Ukraine. China is negotiating with Brazil and other countries around the United States dollar. They're becoming way more aggressive with Taiwan. And in short, they're doing this because they see weakness with the current commander-in-chief, one Joe Biden. My view on the presidential primaries amongst Republicans is that our nominees got to hit the ground running on day one and be able to say to the world, look, American leadership is back. We're not going to have countries and their sovereignties be taken advantage of. We want to actually have global security and global trade and, frankly, global harmony. I remember Hillary Clinton once said in a debate in 2016 that if Donald Trump became president of the United States, we would be on the precipice of World War III. Well, that never happened. As a matter of fact, the world got a lot safer. If anybody's got us on the precipice, it's Joe Biden. So if you ask me a decision between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, what I'm looking for is somebody who can come in day one and get America back on track. Donald Trump has done it once. He can do it again. And I would ask all Americans, you have President Trump, you have President Biden. They both done the job. The question is, who did it better?
I'm going to let
we
you
know the
respond
answer to that one.
No, I appreciate that. Let me just go to his first point. So Warren Buffett's secretary pays a higher tax than Warren Buffett, higher tax rate than Warren Buffett. That's the America we live in. The majority of Americans cannot adequately respond to a $400 emergency. I don't know what kind of district Brother Byron represents, but I represent people who live in the projects, people who live in public housing, where we haven't invested a dime in public housing in over 10 years. So this extraordinary economy that the brother's talking about doesn't trickle down to my constituents who live in Eden Wall projects, doesn't trickle down to my constituents who live in the poor areas of Mount Vernon, Yonkers, New Rochelle, Portchester, and Greenburgh. So this glorious economy where the wealthy continue to hide trillions overseas and use the money for stock buybacks instead of creating new jobs, that's the economy that people are living with and dealing with every day. And then when we talk about inflation, these companies are price gouging, making record profits during the pandemic and post-pandemic because they're raising prices even after we dealt with the supply chain issue. Now, in terms of Donald Trump, the brother's making the debate way too easy for me. World War III? We had the first attack on the U.S. Capitol since the War of 1812. The first attack on the U.S. Capitol by U.S. citizens in U.S. history. Who facilitated and nurtured this attack? Donald J. Trump.
That's actually
on
not true.
Twitter,
That's
on all these social media platforms.
That's not true.
Come on January 6th.
Name
it's
the
going to
statement.
be crazy.
Jamaal, name the statement.
I'm going to meet, he in his speech, I'm going to meet you down there. He tried to ride with the Secret Service. They was like, chill, President Trump, you bugging. You can't ride with us. He let his supporters come in past the metal detectors with guns during the speech on January 6th. They were carrying wooden crosses down the street. This is what he did. So he's endorsing an insurrectionist.
Not true at all.
He's part of a party.
Not true at all.
Many of them voted to overturn the election results and push the big lie.
Democrats have voted to overturn elections too, Jamal.
Brother, choose
Democrats
another party.
Democrats haven't voted to overturn an election.
I'm sorry.
They didn't do that in 2004. They didn't do that in 2000.
I'm talking about right now.
You're bringing up old stuff, so I'm bringing up old stuff too.
Trump was caught on tape.
What did he admit to? Say again.
Trump was caught on tape admitting to sexually assaulting women. I just grab him by the you-know-what. He was recently indicted in New York for hush money payments to a porn star.
You and I both know that indictment is foolishness. And
foolishness?
It's foolishness. It's political,
Listen,
and you know this. But let me go ahead. I'll raise you one better.
Go ahead.
I'll raise you one better. Because if we're going to talk about stuff going on in the background, you have the president's brother, the president's son. They are taking wire payments from people across the globe. Jamaal, I've seen some of the documents myself. They are taking these payments. We've already documented $1 million going to Hunter Biden, facilitated with other members of the Biden family
Biden
while
not
he's sitting in the White House.
That's
what, dude, stop that.
Hunter Biden's not running for president.
Now you know better than that.
Joe Biden
you
is the
know
president.
better than that. You know better than that.
Joe
if
Biden.
Hunter Biden's getting money from people with Chinese companies, if he's facilitating the sale of a cobalt mine to China, while Joe Biden is setting energy policy in the United States. You don't think that man's compromised? Come on. You don't think he knows what his son is doing? He doesn't know what his son is doing?
You're talking about Hunter
Jamaal,
Biden right now.
Tell me he doesn't know what his son is doing?
Listen.
I'm telling you that the president's judgment is compromised.
I want to bring this back because we can really go to a lot of places here, but I want to go back to 2024 and the two frontrunners for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, Trump and Biden. They would be the oldest presidents in U.S. history.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the future of your party after Biden and Trump?
So the future of our party is Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. The future of our party is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. The future of our party is Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Summer Lee, Greg Casar, Hakeem Jeffries, Gretchen Whitmore, Greg Newsom, Governor Newsom, Wes Moore, on and on and on.
All right, well, then let me ask
Our
you.
bench is crazy.
Let me ask you this
Our
then.
bench is
Hold on,
off the
Congressman.
hook.
Then are you going to endorse Biden, assuming he's going to announce?
yeah.
Or would you like to see one of them?
2020, if
2024.
Biden announces a run for 2024, I'm going to endorse Biden.
You will?
Yes. And then we will do whatever we got to do to push him and hold him accountable to make sure he's responding to the American people. That's all we've been doing. The American people want to see universal health care, universal child care, investments in housing, investments in dealing with climate change. They want to see a woman have a right, her own reproductive rights. This is what the American people want to see, by and large, even in Republican states and counties. So we're going to hold them accountable to that.
What do you see as the future of your party after Biden and Trump?
Oh, man, our future is bright. Are you kidding me? We already have America's governor in Ron DeSantis. You have Governor Youngkin. You have Governor Noem. You got Tim Scott. We have so many. Our roster is super deep. You got people in Congress right now who, frankly, they can do a significantly better job than a lot of people in
I could beat everyone
Hold on,
you
man.
just
I
mentioned
let
in
you
the
talk.
presidential debate.
Now you know that's a lot because you can't even stand next to me in the presidential debate. But let's move on. Are you going to let me talk? You're going to tell me to talk over
my
me.
brother,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Here we go. But let me go back to what the American people need. We have a problem at our southern border created by Joe Biden. The southern border is a mess. It is created by the president on purpose. There are 70,000 deaths per year from fentanyl. Per year since he's been president of the United States. We were talking in the opening segment about guns. But the Democrats don't want to do anything about the border. They act like it doesn't exist. The czar, the border czar, she was down there for an hour and a half. I've made 4 trips myself. I can tell you right now the 4 things you need to do to secure it. Number 1, give border agents the ability to actually make determinations of credible fear. Number 2, you can't allow rampant asylum at the southern border because what is happening is the drug cartels are taking advantage of our border policy. There are young girls who are being raped on the journey to our southern border. That is happening right now today under the nose and the guise of Joe Biden and the Democrats. The American people don't want to see fentanyl in their streets, killing family members, killing friends, people taking a Valium or whatever, it's laced with fentanyl and they're dying as a result. The American people don't want that. Number 2, the American people want an economy where inflation isn't crushing their pocketbooks. Wages are actually up. But the problem is wages adjusted for inflation are down. Everybody's falling behind. Black families have fallen behind under Joe Biden. Under Donald Trump, black families were actually making more money, building more wealth, had more economic opportunity. That has all eroded under Joe Biden and is getting worse. Seniors on fixed incomes, they're falling behind. The very people, Jamaal, that you want to help, they're falling behind under your president. They're not the same group of Americans than they were in 2018. And we all get the pandemic. It was awful, and we've now moved past that. But we got to get back to sound economic principle that works for everybody. And what Joe Biden and the Democrats are offering doesn't work. And the people you listed, they all support these same economic policies, or worse. That's not going to be helpful for the future of America.
So not much of what you just said was true, but I'm going to.
Oh, every part of it was true.
I'm letting you.
So
every part of it was true.
I have also visited the border, and I met with Border Patrol police, and they told me well over 90% of the people they stop are not committing any crimes at all. The only crime is seeking asylum in our country, if you want to call it.
But you're not allowed to.
Number one.
Under
Number
federal
two.
law today.
Number
one
two.
thing, real quick. I haven't interrupted you, but I got to stop you here.
Number 2.
Under federal law
Be quick, hurry
today,
up.
you're not allowed to claim asylum at the southern border. Joe Biden is ignoring the law and allowing that process to take
let me
place.
finish.
That's the law,
Number
folks.
2, 70% of fentanyl that comes in here is brought in by American citizens. That's a fact. Number 3, I've also visited the Northern Triangle, where the majority of mass migration comes from. Have you heard of United Fruit? Have you heard of the Iran-Contra scandal? Are you very familiar with the way America and our Western allies have disrupted the economies in Central and South America, leading to abject poverty, hunger, and despair, and how we have funded militaries and police in those countries to intimidate so that corporations can come in and mine? We've left them with nothing. That's why they're coming here seeking asylum. And then third, I've met recently with one of the top economic advisors in the country. And the economic forum in our country, one of their main priorities, comprehensive immigration reform. Because immigrants are the engine of our economy. And right now, because of Trump's disruptive policies, they're dealing with fear and despair as they try to enter.
Disruptive policies that unleashed America's economy? The disruptive policies that allowed Americans to thrive than at any other time in American history since the Reagan administration, those disruptive economic policies, I will tell you this, there are Americans,
all right, gentlemen,
white, black, Hispanic, they want those economic policies.
You both have to come back because clearly there's a lot more to discuss. But I want to thank you both. I really mean that. Millions of people in America, they believe everything you just said. Millions of people believe what you just said. I think it is important to hear different perspectives and to have tolerance for those perspectives. And you both showed that. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
There we go. All right. I just sat here. My job was easy. So thank you also for making my job so easy.